Let's talk about, well, the truth that your story doesn't actually always have to end with that perfect fairy tale ending. It doesn't. If we're talking about your spark story, we're talking about what in the world you're sharing in the moment with the work that you're doing. Here's three times your story doesn't have to end with a fairy tale ending. Number one, if it's not the ending of your story. Far too often, we put an ending on a story that's just the end of the chapter, not the end of the story. So if it's the end of the chapter, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be rosy. There's more to come. Secondly, it doesn't have to be, you know, the after, basically. It doesn't actually have to be the happily ever after. We all hear that. What happens after the happily ever after? Let's continue on with the truth of the story, basically. And in that, it doesn't have to be so perfect and so beautifully tied with a ribbon at the end. Lastly, your story doesn't have to actually, well, it can speak to the truth of humanity. Everyone doesn't have to be perfect. The prince doesn't have to be perfect. The queen doesn't have to be perfect. Life won't be perfect in the end. So tell the truth about it. Tell the truth about what's really happening. And when you do that, it isn't about really creating an unrealistic expectation or the spoiling the fairy tale persona, but it's about creating true connection because that's what our stories are all about, spark stories and otherwise. They're ways to connect with us. And yes, spark stories naturally inspire, but there's also inspiration in telling the truth about what's really going on. Like childbirth is painful, people. So make sure that you share the truth versus being like, oh, it's such a blessing. You'll love childbirth. No, it's painful, people. There's honesty in telling the truth. And more importantly, there's connection and more deeper relationships at hand as well. So you don't always have to share the fairy tale ending every time.